We appreciate your viewing our session, the Forest Stewardship Program, Creating New Priorities and Providing Technical Support to Landowners, a program of the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, in partnership with Massachusetts Woodland Institute, a subsidiary of the Franklin Land Trust, Mass Audubon, and in collaboration with many other partners. Tonight, you'll hear from Michael Downey, Forest Stewardship Program Service Forester, Program Coordinator, and Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation Stewardship Program, as well as Alicia Coleman, Postdoctoral Research Associate from the Applied Forest Ecology Lab in the University of Connecticut, and myself, Emily Voss, Land Protection Specialist at the Franklin Land Trust and Executive Director of the Massachusetts Woodlands Institute. We're grateful to volunteer Lee Hallis, dual master's student in regional planning and sustainability sciences and research assistant in land management at UMass Amherst, for assistance tonight, moderating the talk and helping us answer your questions. Our talk will end at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be recorded and available at the MassLand website after the conference. We'll also make our slides available for download as well through the conference organizers. We just ask that participants keep yourself muted during the presentations. We'll have some discussion and welcome your questions after the speakers have completed their remarks. Please place any questions in the chat function. So thank you very much. And now I have the pleasure of asking Mike Downey to begin our presentation with an overview of the stewardship program and its goals.
Thanks, Emily. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I'm presenting from is the traditional territory of the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. I'd like to start off with an example of indigenous stewardship that has informed modern day forestry, and that is the Menominee tribe. The Menominee territory originally included an estimated 10 million acres in present day Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The Menominee call themselves the Forest Keepers. Marshall Pecori served as the forest manager for Menominee tribe for 50 years. In an interview from 2020, Marshall said that the tribes talk about the seventh generation and looking out down the road to that seventh generation so that all generations will have a forest to think about like we have today. If you're not familiar with the seventh generation principle, this principle is taught by Native Americans, and it says that in every decision, we must consider how it will affect our descendants 7 generations into the future. I believe we can learn much from traditional ecological knowledge and the Menominee approach to conservation. It's great to be back here at the Mass Land Trust Conference. It's something that is dear to my heart. It's something that I always enjoy attending and being part of. And what I'd like to say is it's really not about the people coming together and hearing ideas. It's really what I believe is that we come together for the same reason, that we come here because we share similar values and we share similar beliefs. The Working Forest Initiative really continues to reinforce a discovery that I made about 25 years ago. And that discovery profoundly changed my view of forestry and why I chose forestry as a profession. And the discovery also changed and challenged me as a forester and how I operate within my profession. As it turns out, forestry is more about people than it is about forests. And I'm really excited to share with you tonight what I've been working on for the last 2 years.
Mike, just before you go on, There's a little technical aspect of your slides. There's a box that covers part of them. So if you can check to see if that's something that can easily be corrected, that'd be great. We all want to see your images.
Excellent. Thank you. Is that better or not?
It's still there.
Oh, there. I wish I knew how to.
Maybe click off to the side of the box, the window. Well, it's not a major issue, so
Okay.
maybe it'll go away on its own. Thank you.
I doubt it. Is it move when I move it, or does it stay the same? I guess is my question to you.
It moves when you move it.
Okay, thank you. So let's see if I can get this.
Right now it shows at the top of the screen, which
Okay.
is better.
Okay. Well, I will dump it up at the top. I wish I knew how to change that. It's my first time ever getting that feedback in Zoom, so I don't know if it's something on my end or something else. Sorry about that. Let me just go back. So I would say the conservation community has always been based on action. And really, over 100 years ago, the forestry and conservation community was at that time addressing a real perceived loss of forest land, cutting in agricultural practices that degraded productive soils. And we were trying to figure out how to answer this question about how do we ensure the capacity of the forest to self-renew. Much has changed in forestry and the conservation community over the last 100 years. However, our responsibilities for helping the forest and family forest owners remain unchanged. I think Aldo Leopold really provides a great foundation for at least my work and the work of others, and really is an inspiration for me and thinking and some of the actions that I take on. And Aldo's words were, health is the capacity of the land for self-renewal, and conservation is our effort to understand and preserve this capacity. Brett Butler and Dave Kittredge, Paul Catanzaro, I could go on, really have provided a very clear message to us in the conservation community that if we're interested in forest conservation, we must be also interested in those who own the forests. These family forest owners have done remarkably well to steward this land. And with our support, we will ensure that these forests continue to grow and be resilient for many years to come. With your support in the conservation community, as well as the support of the consulting forester community and other natural resource professionals, we've made some great strides in helping landowners make better informed decisions. Studies have shown forest planning documents like the Forest Stewardship Plan are an effective intervention point for increasing engagement, especially around climate adaptation. One message that comes through loud and clear from the research is that foresters and other natural resource professionals play a central role in landowner decision-making. It's also important to really not focus exclusively on this plan. It's also getting back to the idea that throughout time, forests have always included people. We probably have, I've probably shown this slide probably 1,000 times in my illustrious forestry career, and it honestly has not changed here in Massachusetts for a very, very long time. And that's really about what drives people in terms of why do they own their woods. And consistently it comes up that these amenity values, privacy and beauty and wildlife habitat, nature protection, these things always rank the highest of why people own their land. And, you know, I think that in my experiences that these are snapshots in time as we recognize landowner objectives and reasons for owning woods can change as they maybe become brand new landowners to have recently purchased a piece of property, or maybe they've owned it for a very, very long time and are working towards legacy issues and how to conserve it in perpetuity. So,
Mike,
this is a snap. Yes.
I think that we aren't seeing the slide that you're describing. So why don't you stop sharing and then reshare? Because then I think we'll get back to where you're at. Maybe that'll correct some of the other issues too.
Sounds good.
When in doubt, start
I
again.
should start over.
Thanks, Mike.
Not a problem. Let's see. Just double check this. Is that better?
Yeah, we see reasons for owning wood in Massachusetts, 10 or more acres.
Sounds good. So. Very strange. All right. So landowners recognize the reason that they own these forests and these family forests. Really, it comes down to these amenity values. And I think when we start to kind of go down the path of talking about climate and climate change, especially with landowners, some of these values can really help with our messaging and can really help with providing a point of engagement. And so if we look at values such as nature, that's a very tangible, a very visceral concept to landowners, because they generally have a direct interaction with nature through their connection with their forest and their woods. So promoting activities that enhance biodiversity and resiliency will really resonate well with landowners that have these amenity values, especially the nature piece and the wildlife and privacy piece. So even though amenity values dominate, let me see if I can fix this. Please bear with me.
Try clicking on from current slide under slideshow.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that and it's just not.
Okay, great.
Nothing's working at this point.
I've
All
got
right.
your slide.
Maybe you should
We
click
can
the
see it.
little presentation button in the bottom right-hand corner next to the zoom in and zoom out. Next, yes, to the left, to the right. Other one. Yep, to next one over. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. We still don't see it though. I'm not sure why. It's really strange.
Yeah, I'm tempted to start my day over at this point.
I'd say go on as you are.
So can anyone see that, what's up
Yep.
right now?
It says percentage of acres harvested during landowners' tenure, 10 plus acres.
Perfect. So we're just going to kind of scroll through it in maybe an old-fashioned way, if that's okay with everybody. So
Works fine.
So even though the amenity values dominate why folks own woods, I think it's also important to recognize that well over 80% of the landowners are going to cut trees under their ownership. So if we can recognize that, and that many forest landowners are implementing what I would consider climate adaptive actions kind of incidentally, so things like wildlife habitat improvement or management, firewood cutting, thinning, those activities are kind of climate adaptive actions. However, they're not purposeful. And they're somewhat incidental and realistically may not necessarily ensure long-term forest resilience. However, I think it's important to recognize that some of those practices, some of those actions on the ground can be used as positive motivators towards additional actions that are more long-term. So if forest landowners are implementing incidentally climate adaptive actions, how can we better inform these actions on the ground? Our approach to answering this question is climate forestry. The focus of climate forestry is providing information and knowledge so that management actions on the ground are providing a more resilient forest for the long term. So I think we all recognize Massachusetts is a little unique in a variety of ways, and the concern over climate change is no different. Here in Massachusetts, according to the National Woodland Owner Survey by Brett Butler in 2018, 56% of family forest owners in Massachusetts believe climate change is a concern or a great concern. You compare that to the United States, which is only 37%, you can see that people have climate on their mind increasingly. So with some of that background about the landowner base that we all work with every day, I'm really happy to bring the news about this new climate smart forestry program to you guys first. We've worked really hard to develop a suite of resources for foresters, family forest owners, land trusts, municipalities, all to help keep the forest resilient. And it wasn't done with any small effort. It was done through a wonderful collaboration with a variety of interests, both at a national level as well as locally here. And we could not have done this without the great minds. And I was fortunate to be part of this team. So very fortunate to work with some great minds on this project. One of the major lifts during the past 2 years was to really reimagine the forest stewardship plan, and specifically about the content that we're trying to provide in that. This reimagining allowed us to include more forest level carbon and climate information regarding specific to the landowner's forest. We've also are just rolling out, this is brand new, a pilot cost share program in the Mohawk Trail region. And this is really about helping to spread the word about the new climate forestry program, but also to help with some financial assistance to offset the costs associated with developing and writing these forest stewardship climate plans. A suite of programming assistance is really rapidly developing in this state, and it's specifically around climate smart practices. And this rapidly developing assistance is really going to help to move ideas to actions on the ground. The past 2 years also brought along with it a lot of writing and publishing. And really, this forest stewardship program also spent a considerable amount of time self-reflecting as well. I think we all did during this period. Brett Butler, I think, kind of framed my reflection, at least, with we can't know what we don't know. And really, one really great project that came out of this self-reflection period was the Forest Stewardship Priority raster data set. And I really can't wait to see Alicia's presentation that will be up shortly on this new spatial data set. And this raster data set has been extremely useful to the Forest Stewardship Program. recently we have used Alicia's analysis from that to build programs for landowner engagement around that. Additionally, we've added some more booklets to our Caring for Your Woods series, which I'm really excited about. I think the Setting Goals is such a wonderful publication that was done in cooperation with Northern Woodlands. And if you have not seen that yet, please connect with me at a later time, and we'll make sure to mail some of the newer booklets out. But we also produced 2 other booklets as well during this period, which is specific to climate and then also carbon. And we're really excited to share those with everybody. Lastly, I would like to highlight a grant program that has really far exceeded its original scope when it started in 2011, and that's the 75-25 grant. It's really geared towards helping municipalities implement their forest stewardship plan. Climate adaptation practices really have been strongly part of the applications this year from the towns that we've received and approved. For example, Great Barrington, Clinton, Stockbridge, and Natick are tackling invasive species and habitat improvement, which are critically important for climate and climate-friendly forestry practices. Ashland is another town that has a great climate-friendly project as well, where they're improving on forest regeneration through enrichment, or what we call underplanting, along with setting up deer exclusions. So I'm real excited to see the success on that as well in Ashland. It's also important to recognize that the 75-25 grant can not only help with implementation, but it can also be used for outreach and communication. And the town of Norton's Nature in 90 video collection is a great example with it. So am I gonna even try to play this video? Let's see.
Hi everyone, welcome to Nature in 90 Seconds. Today we have 3 very common wetland ferns we can look at. The first one is cinnamon fern. You can tell it's very appropriately named. This one is called royal fern. And then over here we have a sensitive fern. Thanks for joining today.
I would imagine that did not show up probably either. So I apologize if that didn't
Came
happen.
up great. It looked great, Mike.
Okay,
Beautiful.
perfect. One thing for certain, though, I would say that the communities have been very creative that we've worked with the Community Forest Stewardship Implementation Grant, and some of the projects that have been done with that grant program is just remarkable, and that Nature in 90 is a great example of that. So enjoyed really sharing just a small portion of what the last 2 years has been in my life, in my work life at least. I would like to stress, though, that in order for the success at the landowner level, we really need cooperation and trust. That is also important. And the challenges in front of us today are not any different or as difficult as they were over 100 years ago. However, the conservation community and the forestry profession has the knowledge and the tools to communicate the importance of forest management under a changing climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that very informative presentation. Under difficult circumstances, we're all used to dealing with Zoom and technology, I'm sure, after this long. Now, Alicia Coleman will present results from her work on priority lands analysis for the stewardship program.
Sorry, in one moment. Okay, can everyone see a shared screen?
Yes,
Thank
priority
you.
lands assessment for the Massachusetts Forest Stewardship Program.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily. And thanks to Mike for that great presentation. Hello, everyone. I am Alicia Coleman. I recently finished my PhD in regional planning at UMass Amherst. And I got my start in Massachusetts back in 2014 with the formerly Mass Lift and now TerraCore AmeriCorps program, working with the Sudbury Valley Trustees Land Trust for 2 years. So I'm excited to be on this side of the presentations today instead of exclusively a viewer. And during my PhD, I was contracted, why aren't we clicking? There we go. I was contracted by Mike and Emily to help with this priority lands assessment for the Forest Stewardship Program. And as Mike has referenced, the Forest Stewardship Program is operated by the U.S. Forest Service and delegated to each state to choose how they will distribute and reach out to private landowners as they see fit. And one major part of Mike's job in reporting every year is to meet all of these program performance measures and to report on metrics for any number of these different measures that they've instituted as standards. But you'll notice that 4 out of 13 of these reference these Forest Stewardship Program priority areas that either landowners should be own land within, or there should be a certain number of acres that are covered under these program priority areas. But the definition of what the Forest Service considers to be a priority area is something that's either of high program potential or a priority by the State Forest Action Plan. Very broad, perhaps, which is a good thing at the level of the state. But then when it comes down to figuring out what these lands are, certain decisions need to be made as to what is and is not an eligible or a priority area. And using the State Forest Action Plan is a great start, but can also lead to some mismatch of information or just the difference between what different priorities are. So for example, on the left-hand side, we see what would be more traditionally known as ecosystem services that services can provide. So things like water quality, rare species habitat, anything that you see in the blues and greens, mostly around all of our metropolitan areas around the state. Those are, more traditional high value forests that could be, ideal candidates for stewardship and for stewardship planning. And then there's also, a lot of attention given in Massachusetts and in cities across the world about urban greening and urban tree planting and the value of not only planting and installing new trees, but also stewarding trees in, less typical rural and more either suburban or, densely urban areas, and the value of that. And of course, you'll see that these areas are completely opposite of one another, which means, we still have an entire state of forests that, could be worth stewarding in different capacities. So like I mentioned, last year, I was able and lucky enough to be contracted to help out with what was started last year, but it was actually referencing the 2019 Priority Lands Assessment, since a lot of work couldn't be done through 2020 and 2021. And tonight I want to go through the equipment that we used to perform this assessment, the different types of data that we chose to include and the data that was excluded, and then some very basic results. And throughout these slides too, I do have links to different references that I've used or just have found helpful. So definitely download the slides if you're interested in these links. Okay, so first talking about equipment, as I'm sure or I can imagine, anything having to do with mapping usually requires access to something called the Geographic Information Systems, or a GIS, and not just any GIS that can process what Mike calls raster, and is basically just the imagery style of data, and not all GIS tools have this capacity. There are some free versions of a GIS, usually when we learn about GIS in school, we're all provided a subscription and then are looped into only or having loyalty to certain subscriptions. So the equipment that I used for this particular analysis is ArcGIS Pro. And there are lots of resources online if you are interested in learning about GIS. The UMass Libraries has a great series of tutorials and different links to teach yourself how to do a lot of these things. And also, if you are interested in purchasing some of this capacity for your own software, for your own machines, Esri, the maker of the ArcGIS suite, does have a nonprofit organization program that I think substantially subsidizes a lot of the costs of these things. So not only do you need the right software, unfortunately, not every computer is created the same, and there are some minimum hardware requirements that different softwares like ArcGIS Pro or any other GIS do need. So there is, Esri offers something called a tech check to make sure that your computer can handle the processing needed to perform any of these GIS style analyses. But also, just because something can run, of course, doesn't mean that it'll run quickly or efficiently. So you will know pretty quickly whether or not your machine can handle it. Okay, so talking about some of our inclusion data. So we first wanted to basically identify all of the forested areas that exist in Massachusetts. And the best way I knew how to do this on a really coarse statewide scale was using something called the National Land Cover Dataset. This is a data set that provides land cover data for all of the continental and non-continental United States, I believe about every 3 years. And there are several forest classes that I was able to chisel down and get our forest areas. There is a really neat interactive tool that you can use online to check out not only the land cover, different types of land cover classes, including agriculture, wetlands, different types of wetlands, open waters, all of that. Also different areas of impervious surface down in the lower left-hand corner, as well as the percentage of forest canopy cover in any particular area of the US. So definitely check out this site if you're interested and want to be able to get a nice aerial view of land cover for your own region. And I just zoomed in here into the State House region of Boston to show that when dealing with tree cover specifically, that a really what they call coarse resolution, a 30 by 30 meter resolution data set is not always apt for handling tree cover in dense urban or suburban areas, just because of 30 by 30 meters of a pixel size is about 1/10 of a mile. You're not going to capture any small street trees or any small areas that could have trees, but just wouldn't be able to be picked up by that size image. So something like the Mass GIS land cover land use data set from 2016 might be better used by your organization for much smaller areas. It's a 1 meter by 1 meter resolution and picks up quite a bit more detail than the 30 by 30. Okay, great. So we talked about isolating those forest cover areas. Then we need to isolate only private properties that exist over 10 acres. And again, lucky enough, we're in the state of Massachusetts where there is an L3 standardized assessor's parcel data set available for the entire state. So not only do I have all of the information needed to know where parcel boundaries exist across one entire state, that information is standardized and I don't need to go through and do much data cleaning. I just need to start swiping away and removing things as we need to. So for this particular analysis, we removed all public rights of way, tax title lands, and other water bodies, was able to calculate and isolate only those, every individual parcel that existed with greater than 10 acres. And then again, further narrow that down to only residential properties, again, because we're dealing with this non-industrial private landowners to target for the for forest stewardship planning. Commercial and industrial places were not a priority here. And lastly, based on the state forest action plan, we really wanted to prioritize and take into account these high elevation habitat areas. And in accordance with the action plan, high elevation areas of Massachusetts are greater than 1,700 feet. So we included all forests that exist mostly in the western part of the state, but also some areas in the central part of the state as well. And then the only areas that we decided to exclude for this analysis are publicly owned lands. So just to clarify though, that public lands can qualify for forest stewardship planning, and you should definitely talk to Mike about more about that. However, they cannot be considered priority areas. So we could not include them as part of this analysis, but again, they can be covered for forest stewardship planning. So we used two data sets to remove these publicly owned lands. To supplement the MassGIS protected and recreational open space data, I needed to take out some much larger military installations that I used an Esri-based US federal lands data set. However, a really glaring oversight was that not only did I remove some federal lands like large military installations, I also removed American Indian owned land areas in Massachusetts as part of this. So that was, something that we need to, we will improve upon for next time. But, unfortunately, that the American Indian owned lands was meshed with all other federal lands of this particular data set. So we will do better next time. Okay, so did a lot of, raster processing that I don't go into details here, but the final results are these great green priority areas of both stewardship potential and what we consider to be those high stewardship potential areas that are those privately owned lands that are both high elevation and greater than 10 acres. And you'll see to the map to the right that the state is sectioned into the DCR forest stewardship districts, where there is a service forester appointed to serve each of these districts. And most of the lands that have the highest stewardship potential exist in regions 11 and I have it down here, 11 and 8. And then I converted this into a density map because it becomes a lot easier to look at. And you can see that there's still a great number of acreage available in a place like the Cape, but the southeast part of the state. It's just distributed over a much wider and greater area, as you can see by the blue color here. So when we're looking to, if you're most interested, or if someone like Mike is most interested in managing or to try and recruit folks with the greatest number of acres in mind, you would probably be trying to hit those areas with both the densest number of acreage per service forestry district. But if you was interested in managing for sensitive landscapes, you might want to also include in some data like the Biomap 2, though I hear Biomap 3 is on our horizon, or other supplemental data sets like the Nature Conservancy's Resilient and Connected Landscapes. This doesn't paint too much of a bigger or better picture than what looking at all of the lands, but this does just start chiseling down and isolating only those areas that would not only be greater than 10 acres and residential lands, but also those that fall within the biomap to polygons and do serve other ecological purposes or intended to serve different ecological purposes. So here, again, most of the, that kind of wipes out a lot of the Boston metro area, the Worcester metro area, and, Springfield, but does show a lot of opportunity in the southwestern part of the state, all along the Berkshires, up through the Amherst area in Western Massachusetts, and also along the North Quabbin region and different parts of the Cape as well. And then a lot of this, I don't show as a map, but do show as a table. A lot of these forest stewardship priority areas do coincide with the Nature Conservancy's Resilient and Connected Landscape Analysis. Shows that there is plenty of acreage available that would also be considered resilient as part of climate flow or climate corridor zones, or other areas that are also considered to be vulnerable to climate change. And then just looking at forest stewardship planning prioritization from a completely different direction, perhaps someone like Mike would be interested in reaching out to underserved or new populations and new residents and landowners, maybe less so for particular folks that own the land, but actually providing stewardship opportunities for populations that may not have otherwise, experienced that because they don't own land in these areas. So all I did for this analysis was I overlaid our priority lands with the Massachusetts designated environmental justice areas, which use a combination of different census data, like the proportion of folks that speak English or English as a second language, meet different income thresholds, different racial brackets, things like that. And I just chiseled down the number of acres that fall within environmental justice block groups. And you'll see that the priority areas do shift a little bit. We're focused a bit more around the Pittsfield area and the northwest part of the state now, a bit more in in region 6, closer to Athol and Orange, down closer to the central Massachusetts area in region 5, and some other smaller pockets of environmental justice opportunities are available through all sections and all regions 1, 2, and 3 as well. And then also too, I coincided our data with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council's community types data set that clusters and classifies all of Massachusetts communities into similar types or similar topology of different types of communities based on past land cover changes and future population projections. So of course, here the greatest number of the highest acreage number of opportunities are available in the rural towns of the state, but much further down the list, there is still substantial opportunity to do stewardship planning in what they call the sub-regional urban centers, like the Haverhills, the Holyooks, Fitchburgs, places like that. So many different opportunities to reach different folks in different styles of places. Okay, oops. Okay, all right, that's all that I have for my talk. Again, I am very grateful to have the chance to collaborate with folks like Emily and Mike and to put all of this college education to good use. And here's my email and Twitter if you want to connect more. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Really appreciate the work that you and Mike put into all of this program. And I'm going to bring us from the macro to the micro, I think. Let me show my screen. So I hope you can all see my slide talking about the Franklin Land Trust that I work for. I'm the land protection specialist at Franklin Land Trust and the executive director for Massachusetts Woodland Institute. And just a little background on our organizations. Franklin Land Trust is a regional land trust with headquarters in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. We work with landowners, cities and towns, and state and federal agencies, along with many other partners, to conserve and protect the natural landscape and our agricultural heritage. Massachusetts Woodland Institute is a nonprofit subsidiary of FLT, which educates and provides assistance for land management and seeks to support the rural economy. FLT operates in Franklin County and also surrounding in the 4 western counties, Franklin, Hampshire, Berkshire, and Hampden. I'd like to acknowledge too that this is the traditional land of indigenous tribal peoples, including Pecumtuck, Nipmuc, Wabanaki tribes. For more than 3 decades, Franklin Land Trust has conserved over 30,000 acres, including private land held in conservation restriction or agricultural preservation restriction, along with land acquired by municipalities or state agencies, and lands which Franklin Land Trust owns in fee. Franklin Land Trust holds 175 conservation restrictions. It's our free-owned lands that I'm going to focus on today. You can see the Crowning Shield Conservation Area and Heath highlighted here, and the Guyot Farm in Plainfield, Mass. Both properties have forest stewardship plans, which have been essential in our management. FLT stewards approximately 900 acres in fee. As we consider properties we own, we seek ways to support our mission and to protect the values of the land. And conservation, gifted or purchased in the case of fee lands, to fulfill the conservation goals of landowners in our region, our organization, and to benefit surrounding communities. Recreation with trails, vistas, fishing and hunting, wildlife habitat, climate resilience and carbon, and many more. We seek to be a model for landowners and stewards of the land, to let them see examples, to learn and provide resources to help them do their own management. We work with DCR to provide cost share to landowners to create long-term management plans. This is also an entryway to other funds and programs that will allow people to implement work on their lands, some of which Mike talked about in his presentation. Stewardship begins with looking at the unique aspects of it. The stewardship plan helps us focus in on what is present. So we start by saying, what are key characteristics of a property? Is there upland forest, wetlands, rivers and streams, existing trails? What's the road access? What kinds of flora and fauna are present? Are there rare species? Is there a farm? And how can the community and wildlife benefit from our stewardship? Are crops cultivated there? What is the indigenous history of the land? Are there trails used by neighbors currently? What kinds of habitat does it provide? How does it provide clean water and air? Are there hunting and fishing opportunities? How could its local wood be used? And are there special resources? For example, our Guyette property in Plainfield has a community garden space. Taking stock of these aspects of the land helps us decide what goals will be there for management of each property. It's the starting place for making your forest management plan. We ask ourselves, how can it best be managed for long-term highest good? Our forest stewardship plan helps bring together our goals with actions. The forest management plan is a key tool for woodland properties. Choice of forester is very important. We work with a variety of consultants to get the benefit of differing interests and knowledge. These are important working relationships over a long period of time. masswoods.org is a great resource maintained by UMass Forestry Extension that can help you find foresters that are in your area, near where the town, your land might be. The forest management plan that the forester will help you create provides an inventory of your woods. Tree species, health, stage of development, wildlife habitat, potential threats, herbaceous species that are present. They also can help you have maps of the property, trails, wood roads. They identify access sites for recreation or timber harvest or wildlife habitat enhancements. And soon they're going to be including climate smart forestry insights, storage and sequestration of carbon, favoring species adapted to changing conditions, what species are threatened, likely stressors, ways to increase health and resilience of our forests, or encourage flood and drought resilience. Overall, it's a long-term plan. It allows you to create objectives and imagine desired future conditions for the land and create guideposts for reaching your goals. A forest management plan is an important resource for funding land management as well. It's often a prerequisite for grant and cost share programs. It's also a set of plans and actions that can create a starting place to explore shared projects with neighbors, towns, tribal organizations, recreational groups, and public agencies. So let's take a look at the two properties I'm going to share with you tonight. First is Guyette Farm in Plainfield, Mass. It's about 102 acres. The property was gifted to Franklin Land Trust by a local farming family. The former farm now has pasture that's being reclaimed by pine and hardwoods. There's saplings growing in the fields. There's stands of poplar that are aging out. Boulder pines and hemlocks are in certain parts of the forest. Streams, wetlands, a raspberry patch, and a tillable area. The open fields provide a scenic view along a well-traveled rural roadway. Some unique aspects of the property. are the community garden I mentioned. It's run by local residents. They tend donor Evelyn Guyette's raspberry bushes. There are trails and a picnic area, parking lot. The former pasture and hayfields still have agricultural value and are important wildlife habitat. The woodlands have a wide variety of species, type, and ages, from older pines and hemlocks to recent fields grown into the poplar and shrubs and maturing maples, birch, and mixed northern hardwoods. When the land was gifted to Franklin Land Trust, a barn was present, but it was a fairly old, unstable structure. So creating our forest stewardship plan helped us identify woodland objectives and actions to take. We connected with our agricultural history of the property. A harvest was planned to provide wood to rebuild the barn. The building has been removed, and the wood that was harvested from the land was sawed by a local sawmill. Usable boards and timbers were recycled to reconstruct the building in the future and are stored now for a future project. For wildlife habitat, during that same harvest, trees were cut to maintain early successional habitat in abandoned fields. Shrub trees and poplar are growing back in. The plan established a goal of keeping about 1/10 of the property in that stage at any given time. For mature stands, the goal is to manage for forest health, habitat, and timber. It also established a reserve stand, approximately 1/3 of the property, or 39 acres, allowing mature trees to age and become old growth in time. Protecting streams and wetlands is important. Many wetland areas are in the reserve stand. Another major goal is recreation. Work done during harvest helped us maintain trails and access to recreation areas. In addition, we would maintain parking areas and make interpretive signs and look for educational opportunities. We've gained many benefits from acting on these plans. The neighborhood use of the garden and trails and picnic tables. We've maintained view across the fields, at the same time providing forage for pollinators. These were enhanced by pollinator plantings. The forest management plan was used as a basis to apply for a variety of grants. So it helped us be able to take action. We've held walks and workshops about benefits of harvest to create young forest stands, along with setting aside wildlands. And we milled local wood for the barn, supporting local businesses and sequestering carbon from harvested wood. And an inventory of birds has shown an increase in numbers of and species present. And we've hosted trainings for students and engaged children with the land. The Student Conservation Association, based in nearby Hawley, has used the property for trail work trainings, and we've held interpretive walks and workshops, such as this bluebird box building workshop. We look forward to future building to provide resources for walks, talks, and use of the garden. And here's the barn that was deconstructed, kind of beautiful in all its skeletal beauty. The other property is the Crowning Shield Conservation Area, 98 acres in Heath, Mass. And this is a former farm also, with about a mile frontage on the west branch of the North River. There are heavy invasive populations, fields covered with multiflora rose, and riverbanks with Japanese knotwood, very familiar in our region. Trails and access roads are present, and there's also another large barn in the property, also in disrepair. It was acquired through assistance of many partners. The State Department of Fish and Game purchased a conservation restriction on the land. Private donors and grants contributed, and there was generous help from many chapters and regional councils of the recreational group Trout Unlimited. Creating our forest stewardship plan helped us identify management objectives to maintain forest health and watch for impacts of things like hemlock woolly adelgid and scale, which have been found in the area. The hemlock provides really important shade for the river to help protect some native brook trout species. Invasives removal in field and streams, river management, education, recreational access, and structures management. These are all major goals for this property. The benefits we've seen from following up and acting on these objectives have been to support native plants and animals. Removal of invasives in fields increased wildflower populations. Again, we were able to get a grant to plant pollinator trees and shrubs on this land. Active river management, including some wood loading here, you can see on the far bank of the river. has helped enhance native fish habitat. And we've participated in studies and model projects working with Trout Unlimited and other partners to study the positive impacts of this kind of thing. Grant work along the river has been done to reduce sedimentation and also to provide this important fish habitat. It's given us the opportunity to participate in wildlife habitat research. We've opened up fields for wildflowers and planting the trees to support pollinator species, provided areas for research on bumblebees and other pollinators with regional academics. And mapping and on-the-ground observations of the river provided baseline studies for the habitat work we've done. As part of the river and forest management, we've been able to maintain and improve recreational access for hiking and fishing, and improve access roads to reach the river for future management activities and just enjoy it. One of the only ways to reach the river originally was a very narrow trail, which over the course of the years following Hurricane Irene has completely eroded away. So a new trail that was created to allow us to do river habitat management is now an excellent way for hikers and fishers to go from the fields down to the river. A major outcome, other actions that we are still planning are to include a barn to be removed, still in process, improving parking and roadside access, and building a kiosk with interpretive signage about river habitat and native fish. A major outcome of being active on this property has been building partnerships with recreational interest groups and researchers to learn together and find new ways to care for the land. Forest stewardship planning gives us a better understanding of the land by helping craft long-term plans. It's a beginning place that helps you launch your understanding of the land, its needs, its vulnerabilities, and how it can be a valued part of its neighboring communities. It helps us also anticipate and address challenges and serve our communities. It helps us communicate with our members and the public about the benefits of stewardship and careful active management. It's allowed us to support families during times of crisis, providing pandemic resilient outdoor recreational opportunities. It's allowed us to create sites for people to enjoy and appreciate nature, to learn about bird habitat, fish species, wildflowers, fishing, hiking, bird watching. And in the future, we can look for ways to educate ourselves and strengthen tribal ties to the land and climate impacts of our woodlands and natural lands. It gave us a chance to participate in the sustainable wood economy, local wood for local building, while creating habitat and storing carbon. The Forest Stewardship Plan for us has really drawn a lot of connections. It's a legacy from the past that we now steward for a better future. So, thanks to everyone for reviewing and sticking with us. Alicia and Mike, if you want to turn your cameras on and unmute yourself. We've got it, I think, about just exactly 15 minutes before the session ends. And we'd be happy to talk about some of the questions that were put into chat or others that might come up. Let's see. That's the first question we had. And some of these, Mike, I think you already answered, but maybe if you want to talk a little bit more about them. One of the questions from Jim Sutton was, is the grant program intended for private land conservation groups as well as municipal groups? So that's that specific program.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we do get that a lot. So, so if you can think of the grant program as specifically targeting municipalities, and I can give you just a little background on that if it's helpful. So prior to the Farm Bill in 2012, I think, municipalities used to be eligible for USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service cost share funding for a variety of practices. And when the new Farm Bill or the Farm Bill was passed, municipalities no longer were eligible. And under some really smart thinking from Bob O'Connor at EEA and Jennifer Fish and myself, we thought we could fill that vacuum for municipalities and kind of offer at least a little bit of money to implement practices at a municipal level. And that's kind of the birth of that grant program. So I think Emily spoke to it, and she can speak much more detail than I can. Is, you know, land trusts, I think, really have a great opportunity to look into some of the USDA programming, right, and cost share.
NRCS Equip is a great program. There are specific practices that you can apply for. And there's certain rates that are available, and based on how many acres you have, you can apply them. It's complicated. We often work with our foresters to do this. And that's part of the reason why we really want to offer our experience as a model for landowners, because, you know, we at least have some staff who are knowledgeable about forestry or have done this in the past. So many times landowners who are new to it, it's a little bit overwhelming. So we often talk to people, have walks where people can come and take a look at what it's like to have people be on the ground, creating habitat or making trails. And then we're happy to offer them our experiences and help them go through the process, or at least be a helping, supportive hand at hand when you're trying to fill out all those forms and crunch all those numbers. Another question we had was, will all Massachusetts licensed foresters be required to have climate smart forestry training? Do you want to speak to that, Mike?
Sure, that's another great question, and thanks, Sasha, on that. Is, so if you can think of it, if they want that door open for funding for their client, right? So if they're working with a client that is mainly focused on carbon and climate objectives for their woods, it would be probably in their best business interest to get the climate and carbon training that we're offering to private consulting foresters. It's if you're familiar with the Foresters for the Birds program, for the foresters to become able to write those bird plans, there's a process, there's training, there's field activities, and then kind of the culmination of that is them writing a plan, and then they become certified. They can become certified bird foresters. The climate program will be very similar. There'll be trainings offered, and there'll be field work and other things offered as well, and then the culmination of that will be them to write a forest stewardship plan, climate stewardship plan, and then at that point they will become certified climate foresters and will be able to write climate forestry plans. So that's it in a nutshell. So I'd say if I was a private consulting forester and recognizing the Brett Butler information, where the vast majority of landowners are concerned or really concerned about climate, it would seem to be a really good business decision to get trained and get certified in that climate program, and so they can write plans and help landowners manage their forest with climate in mind.
That's great, thank you. We've got some more great questions. I want to combine a couple and jump ahead a little bit. Betty asked two that work well together. Are there forest stewardship plans that one can see as examples? And what are the first steps you suggest for a landowner who's never done this? And Betty says, contact Mike with a smiley face. So that is actually a great place to start. You want to talk about those two questions, Mike? And that made me think too about how we're sort of, there are sample plans that take into effect climate forestry issues, and there are ones for bird habitat. So, you know, Betty, there are some sample plans out there. I can actually provide a link in the chat for one that's online that I used in my talk. And then also there are ones that foresters use as well as sort of reference. And Mike, do you want to answer those two questions as well? And Alicia, feel free to jump in at any time.
No, I think you're 100% right, Emily. So there's a couple of places where our website does have a sample plan. I would also, you definitely connect directly with me, but there's some great examples of some really wonderful plans written at the municipal level. So you can find those scattered all over the state. on on town websites. So there's some great examples, and maybe the town you live in has an example posted on their town website. So that's some low hanging fruit. The other low hanging fruit is if these types of programs and the planning process is of interest to you, part of what Emily brought up that I can't stress enough is really finding that forester that speaks to you and somebody that you can work with, because that besides your decision to own the land and buy the land, or however you acquired your beautiful piece of woodland, the second most important piece is really finding somebody to work with that really identifies with your views on the woods. And so that's a critically important step, and we could probably have a whole talk just on that process alone, to be completely honest with you. So in most cases, if I was interviewing a handful of foresters that I was going to choose from to work with, that would be really the top question is, can you please supply me a copy of a recent stewardship plan you've written? And then you'll be able to kind of see the type of work, maybe the type of detailed mapping. Hopefully they have Alicia on board as their map guru, because it's been a pleasure working with Alicia and her talents at the GIS level. So, certain people like hand-drawn maps, and there's plenty of consulting foresters that still provide those. There's others that are looking for more GIS, georeference type mapping. That's kind of where I am in my world, but not everybody likes those. So, those are the things. But if you need links, Emily will provide some. I can provide 100 examples of plans that are currently on the internet posted that you can view as well.
Some other just little tips in terms of if you're approaching this for the first time. Your service forester in your district is a really great resource. There's contact information on the website, and I'll post that link. And also, just like Franklin Land Trust, if you're a landowner who's not a part of the land trust, you can call them up and they'll be very happy to talk to you. And masswoods.org has links also to land conservation organizations and land professionals in your region. So that's a great place to look. And if you're part of a land trust, when we were talking about doing this, I was thinking about there's a lot of small volunteer run land trusts. And I feel like that's really one of the groups that would benefit from this whole process, because it brings some money to maybe you've gotten some properties and you're just trying to get off the ground and see what you can do with them. Doing some forest management planning is a great place to start, because it can really help you understand it. It brings some money in so that you can have the resources to do that. And then you can think about what you'll do on the ground, and forge some relationships with foresters in your area who you can really vibe with and do some good work. There was another question earlier about specific practices for stewardship, climate smart forest plans, underplanting and deer browse. And I think you mentioned them as actually one of the plans that a town was going to do, Mike.
Yeah,
so
another great question from Sasha. So we do have some, I would say, recognized climate friendly practices that really come out of efforts from the Nature Conservancy and others, New England Forestry Foundation and others, Forest Stewards Guild, and many others. So there's some great examples of some really great climate friendly practices out there for forestry. That specific practice, this underplanting or enrichment planting with some sort of deer exclosure, we've seen that approach work in a number of different places. It's been used in Connecticut. It's been used. Cornell University has some great examples of it, as well as the University of Connecticut's experiment and Yale Forest experiment forests as well. There's some very good examples of it historically at the Quabbin Reservoir. There's a really good recent example of it in Ocam on watershed land that was done really in the same line or the same vein as Cornell has been doing, which is building these kind of brush or what we call slash walls around an area that's been treated to keep the deer out and to allow for the forest to regrow. You know, and it really gets back to kind of the general premise. Regeneration is not guaranteed, unfortunately, anymore. As foresters, as a forester, that is probably the most upsetting piece of this when it comes to climate, is that the expectation that something will happen, whether it's Mother Nature disturbance or man-made disturbance, and that will have a response that we're used to occurring in the forest with regeneration. Unfortunately, we can't be predicting that anymore. Observationally, it's not happening, and we all can recognize why. We see it every day out in the forest. We see the invasives, we see the deer issues and other things that are creating regeneration issues for us. And it's not just about when we cut trees, it's when we have natural disturbance that's even more problematic. So we're trying creative ways. There's a number of different mechanisms, some very good peer-reviewed research out there that if you're looking to regenerate oak, there's a number of different ways to kind of get to that point. Mid-story removal, underplanting is one mechanism, you know, so there's a number of different things. But what Ashland is doing is they're trying, you know, and before them, we supported another community, Sherburne, to do the same thing, where they were fencing deer out and they weren't planting things, they were letting natural regeneration occur. So, you know, whatever we can do to support your community in that effort, please, I'd love to have that conversation with you. There's some good examples of that. In terms of private landowners, land trusts, and so forth, yes, I think that there's opportunity with some of the NRCS funding for practices that are going to help with this regeneration issue that some of us in certain parts of the state are facing.
Great. We've got one more question I think we'll end with. Alicia had also answered it in the comments about whether priority land analysis will be available to view anywhere. We're just coming up on 8:15. So I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for participating. There's a lot of amazing presentations being given tonight. So we're really grateful to have you here, and your questions were great. Shout out to one of the concurrent sessions, Josh Rapp, has been talking actually about climate forestry. So if you see that and you want to look it up later when it's recorded, I highly recommend you take time for that. And then there's a survey link in the chat. Thank you, Lee. That we encourage you to fill that out to be able to have future sessions be even better. And we're really glad that we had this opportunity to be able to talk with you all tonight. So Alicia and Mike, you want to talk maybe a little bit about how priority lands analysis may be viewable in the future, or where it is currently? I know there's some links there in the chat.
Sure. Yeah. So the link I provided is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. So this data is available for all of the United States, though I see it was only last updated in October 2021. So our most recent reanalysis for Massachusetts has not made it in this public server just yet. Mike, I don't know if we have plans to disseminate it more openly, or if it's kind of on an as requested basis.
No, it's shareable at any point. So if anybody's looking for that data set, please connect with me. You know, we do try to get stuff put up on MassGIS. Sometimes that's a slow process as well. So, you know, I appreciate everybody's patience, and the data that should be posted to that link at the U.S. Forest Service, obviously, as Alicia said, we're a little slow on, they're a little slow on updating that as well. So if you're real excited to look at that wonderful information from Alicia, please send me an email, give me a phone call, or what have you. That's an easy share on my end.
Great, thank you. Well, we should end now to make sure we honor everyone's time. I want to just encourage everyone to take part in the rest of the conference if you can. Tomorrow morning at 10 on the 25th, there's going to be a plenary and keynote address, which looks really wonderful. And then there's outdoor sessions in the afternoon. So we're all grateful. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk with you all. And I'm really grateful to you, Alicia and Mike, for sharing this information with everyone. We're grateful to everybody who watches the session in the future too, and hope to be able to work with all of you here and all of you in the future to steward the land. So thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening.